Hi everyone and welcome to our webinar on physical development. I'm Stacey Mann, the Early Years and Childcare Subject Specialist here at NCFE, working on all of the cash products. I'm joined today by Angie Rogers.
Hi everybody, I'm Angie Rogers and I'm Subject Specialist for Teaching and Learning.
Thanks, Ange. And we're going to be taking you through today physical development in the early years and then through to primary school as well. We're going to just turn the videos off now so that you can completely concentrate on everything that we're talking about. So welcome to this webinar to discuss the importance of physical development in the early years and beyond. The session forms part of the physical development theme for spring 2022 and is supplemented by a podcast with Shelley Owens, which is now available on YouTube, and an article will also be available. Remember that CPD comes in all shapes and forms, and it's important that the main point of CPD is the impact on your practice. We can all attend training sessions and tick the box, but what we are doing to use the new information, refreshed information, and new ideas and concepts to make a difference to the children and young people with whom we are working with is most important. As I said, I'm Stacey Mann, the Early Years and Childcare Subject Specialist here at NCFE. My background is as a nursery nurse, a manager and a children's centre manager, progressing later on to assessing and teaching, as well as being a Relax Kids and Charge Up coach, which was all about mindfulness for children. So today we'll be focusing in first on the early years and considering how we can support children and families in the daily routines of physical development, but also thinking about how we can think about physical development holistically with the other areas of development and taking a particular interest in the links to wellbeing. So why do we think it's important to share all things physical development? It is one of the prime areas for the EYFS for a reason, and it has been described as experience expectant. This means that the brain is wired to expect this type of development. The establishment of moving the body in early years can be crucial to how we then move our bodies for life. It sounds rather dramatic, but we are laying the foundations for future experience expectant learning. Have you ever observed a baby lying on its back? The baby innately moves their bodies in a way that stretches and gets the blood flowing. Physical development also contributes to cognitive development. The connection between the mind and body is an incredible area to explore, and we will revisit this later. Healthy habits around this in the early years can continue into adulthood. It's also widely believed and proven in some studies that physical development contributes to other areas of development too, such as self-confidence, emotional well-being, and social interaction. So let's take a look at some of the links to well-being, in particular the biological links to the effects of physical development on the body. So first of all, we have dopamine. Dopamine is a type of neurotransmitter. Your body makes it and your nervous system uses it to send messages between nerve cells. That's why it's sometimes called a chemical messenger. Dopamine plays a role in how we feel pleasure. It's a big part of our unique human ability to think and plan. It's also our chemical that allows us to take risks, and that's found in higher amounts in boys. So it's often why you will see boys jumping from high places and being a little bit more of a risk taker than some of the girls may be. Then we have serotonin. Serotonin is a chemical messenger that's believed to act as a mood stabilizer. It's said to help produce healthy sleeping patterns as well as boost your mood. Then we have endorphins. We've probably all heard of endorphins before. They're a group of peptides that are produced by in the central nervous system, and it acts as receptors in the brain. These neurotransmitters, also sometimes thought of as hormones, act to increase feelings of pleasure and well-being, and also to reduce pain and discomfort. Oxytocin typically is known as the love hormone, and all of these chemicals are working together to affect our mood, to affect how we feel, to affect our healthy dispositions. And as you can see from this diagram here, from this image, we have different ways of supporting those chemicals and those hormones that are going on in our brain. If you take a look at dopamine, there is some dopamine, first of all. There are lots there about eating food and celebrating little wins, but also doing self-care activities. And some self-care activities, of course, are going to mean physically moving your body. And you will see with oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphin, there's always an element of being physical and having fun whilst doing so. So it doesn't always have to be running and exercising. It can be some of the smaller things, such as walking in nature or that sun exposure or laughing. So having fun and playing is one of the things that are going to support well-being, but also links to physical development. There are lots of ways in which you can do this, one of them being nature. So we've mentioned this already, as in having a walk outside, but there's lots of ways in which spending time in nature can be positive for our mental health and well-being, from gaining a sense of peace and a boost to our self-esteem, to improve concentration and the psychological restoration. New and exciting research is happening all the time that adds to our understanding of how our natural environment affects the health of our bodies and minds. In fact, some doctors prescribe it as medicine. Go outside, go and get a walk, have a daily walk. The reasons why time in nature has this effect on us are complex and still trying to be understood. The benefits are often related to how our senses connect us to the environment around us, from the shapes in nature we see to the scents that trees give off, and the soft fascination that nature can stimulate, which helps our minds to rest. I once was observing in a nursery where they had really quite torrential rain all day. And one of the parents came to pick up her child, and just by a sight of her child, she said, "You need to go outside, don't you?" And she turned to the teacher, and the teacher had said, "Yeah, actually, we haven't been outside today at all." And she said, I can tell just by the look of his body. I can just tell by the look of his face. And we need to now go and do something physical to support his mental health and well-being, and to support how the rest of the day goes for us. And I thought that was really insightful from that parent, who really understood the child in front of her, really understood her own child and what his needs were. And I think that's important for us as key people in the children's lives to identify that as well. So moving on a little bit to the EYFS. Physical development is one of the three prime areas within the early years foundation stage. Each prime area is divided into early learning goals. For physical development, those are gross motor skills and fine motor skills, which we're going to delve a little bit deeper into a little bit later. Just wanted to share with you that the children at the expected level of development will, and so this is what we're thinking of towards the end of reception, they should be able to negotiate space and obstacles safely with consideration for themselves and others. And if we just have a look at that expected level of development, that is quite complex, and it's something that needs to be practiced. It's not something that can just be a given. It's something that is practiced over time, with lots of opportunities to be able to negotiate that space and the obstacles safely. And that can happen from baby room. That really can start from birth. Demonstrating strength, balance and coordination when playing. Again, these opportunities need to be made available to these children to be able to do this. So think of the children that are in your setting. Think of the children that you may be working with, and think about the times that you give opportunities for them to demonstrate strength and balance and coordination. Sometimes that is not possible when you're maybe you're a family that are living in high-rise flats who haven't got an outdoor space or haven't got a local safe play area. And of course, during the pandemic, when these play areas were closed, or if you are a particular parent who suffers with anxiety and struggles with allowing your children to take those risks. That is something in the early years, in the settings that we're in, the provision that we're providing for these children, we need to consider. We need to think of all of these things and how we can put these things into place in our settings. Move energetically, such as running, jumping, dancing, hopping, skipping, and climbing. Also, fine motor skills. So often when we're talking about physical development, we talk about these big, gross motor skills, forgetting that sometimes within our physical development is also our fine motor skills. So the expected level of development at the end of reception would be thinking about holding a pencil effectively in preparation for fluent writing. Now, we're going to pick that apart a little bit later when we look at fine motor skills, but it will be evident to you when you're working with children, but also evident in the research that actually we can't just go straight to being able to hold a pencil effectively. There's lots that comes before that we'll have a look at. The Department of Health say to aim for at least 3 hours of physical activity across the day for children in the early years, but every movement counts. So you don't need to plan extra activities, you just need to make the most of everyday opportunities. So for example, when you're changing toddlers' nappies, encourage them to lie down and get up themselves, as that helps to strengthen their core muscles and to support and develop their balance and coordination. Encouraging children to walk up and down the stairs by themselves is another good opportunity, but it is challenging, so they may need support with that. And help children learn to use alternate feet by making sure there are opportunities in the setting for them to climb. One of the things that we do at home to support physical development is in the everyday opportunities. So when the children are brushing their teeth, we tell them to change hands and try it with a different hand. And that requires a lot more concentration to be able to do that. And so just thinking of different things that you can support them with. Try starting off by having large blocks for the children to crawl, walk and climb up and over. And when they're more confident, provide stilts so that they can get used to moving their feet at different times. And then, of course, we've got feeding times where they can use finger foods to help promote the fine motor skills, like grasping and hand coordination. Okay. I'm just going to share some research with you that has been carried out by the Early Intervention Foundation on the impact of pandemic life on physical development in the early years. So while there's been no UK evidence for under fives identified within the report, the majority of studies of older children or studies from other countries report a decrease in physical activity, as well as a decrease in positive attitudes towards physical activity as a result of COVID-19. Although variability exists across countries, suggesting the impact will be contextually dependent. There's also the diet and micronutrient deficiency that has been reported. For diet, unhealthy choices in everyday meals and snacking appear to have increased during the pandemic. I know it has for myself. So with some countries since reporting an increase in obesity rates in children and adolescents, and we know that that was one of the things that we needed to work on anyway. For micronutrient deficiency, a limited number of studies support potential vitamin D deficiency as a result of the stay-at-home orders, but no evidence was found on other forms of micronutrient deficiency. Breastfeeding. Evidence regarding breastfeeding was mixed with both positive and negative impacts for women and their infants reported in the UK. Oral health is something that's come up within the EYFS and something that we need to be aware of because of the closure of dentists and healthcare around teeth and around oral hygiene. Also, vaccinations. There's evidence to indicate that routine vaccinations in infants saw a significant reduction as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And sleep. Everyone I spoke to during the pandemic and during the height of the pandemic were all reporting how they hadn't had as much sleep as usual, and that stress development within a lot of families was also evident, so that sleep quality had decreased slightly. Overall, the evidence shows that the physical development of children is likely to have been negatively impacted by the pandemic. And so we really do need to think about each case individually and think about how we can make sure that we're putting things into place to support children's physical development. So we've talked already about the importance of physical development, but we also need to explore how the physical development of gross and fine motor skills link together. So core strength is when the muscles around the front of your stomach, the sides of your stomach and your lower back, also known as your core muscles, are strong. If these muscles are weak, then it can cause a child to have poor posture, which can then cause poor fine and gross motor skills. Fine motor skills are the small movements like picking up a marble or holding a spoon to eat soup. And gross motor skills are those bigger movements like sitting up straight in a chair, walking, running or standing. Core strength is important because your core is one of the main things that support the rest of your body. But did you also know that it is part of your pre-writing skills? Poor posture and weak core muscles can lead to issues with handwriting because they don't have the strength to sit up straight or to grasp the pencil properly. A weak core strength can also cause decreased performance in school because if children can't sit up straight, they may have trouble paying attention to their teacher in class. So there's a few things that we can do to support the core development, and that is through your gross motor skills and the physical activity that you put into every day. So we're thinking about babies having tummy time. We're thinking about toddlers climbing and lifting themselves up. We're thinking about the climbing frame. We're thinking about how they pull themselves up onto that climbing frame. We're thinking about stretches. We're thinking about running and avoiding obstacles. There's lots of different ways that we can support the children's core strength, but we also need to be confident in why we're supporting that core strength. So it could very much be about telling families they might look like they're climbing on the climbing frame, but this is actually pre-writing skills, and this is why. Gross motor skills are the skills that the children develop using their whole body, and you can see it from the baby's earliest movements, and where they try to move and travel. So young children coordinate the whole of their body movements, and they become increasingly confident, agile, and flexible. All children need to feel confident in their gross motor skills, and that comes from practice. For some children, this confidence will come in smaller steps and take longer to achieve. Be patient, give them time and space, and lots of encouraging words. And when we say encouraging words, be specific about what you're actually encouraging and making sure that it's not too big, but it's just very specific to that child. Take expert advice for children with physical and mobility additional needs, because that might needs an extra bit of support from people who are really specialised in that area. Gross motor skills affect well-being and give children opportunities to socialise in play. Confidence and coordination in gross motor skills are essential for the children then developing their fine motor skills. So let's have a think about the enabling environment that we provide for the children. And I'm going to tell you a story here about a child that I was supporting. So there was a little boy in a children's centre that I was supporting, and he had got the wheelbarrow in the garden that he was filling up with all of the bricks. and he'd found all of these bricks and he was putting them all in the wheelbarrow, and he had a plan. And his plan, none of us knew what that plan was, but he'd picked up the wheelbarrow and he'd taken it over to the grass. One of the adults working in that children's centre went over to him and said, "No, no, no, we don't have the bricks on the grass. They've got to stay over here." So she turned him around and she moved him back over to where he was. Straight away, he lost any motivation to move that learning forward. And he was on a mission. He'd got a little learning journey that he'd got in his mind, but that learning journey was cut short, and that was because some of the rules of the children's centre, that they didn't allow, some items to go on the grass. Now, whilst we know that a lot of places will have restrictions and will have rules in place, and that the children are learning all of those boundaries, we could very much have sat with that little boy and channeled that motivation into something similar. So we could have sat with him, or we could have said, where else could you take it? Or you could ask some open-ended questions and get some sustained shared thinking going. Where else could we take it? Where could we build something? What were you going to do? And start that conversation with him, so we're not just stopping that learning journey in its tracks. Because what actually happened for him was that he lost motivation and went and started to do something else. So as we said, those big gross motor skills feed into the fine motor skills. So the fine motor skills involve the use of the small muscles that control the hands, fingers and thumbs. And they help children perform important tasks like feeding themselves, grasping toys, buttoning and zipping clothes, writing, drawing and lots more. The ability to complete self-care and everyday tasks helps a child's self-esteem and confidence to increase. It's important to start working with children on building their fine motor skills early on. Some children may struggle with performing tasks that use their fine motor skills, and they can become quite frustrated and upset when they can't complete those everyday tasks. For example, a child might have a difficult time holding scissors and cutting a longer dotted line, and that could cause them to be frustrated at the task and avoid cutting exercises because they feel it's too difficult. A good way to do this within your teams is to make sure that you're tuning into that. So think about how it feels when you're doing something that doesn't feel quite right to your body. A good way to demonstrate this is to put a phrase in a different language on a board, maybe in a team meeting, or in a for students. You might do this all together in your class. So a phrase on the board that is in a different language. So we don't understand what that writing is. We don't understand what that phrase says. And then to write that phrase using the opposite hand that you would normally write with. And think about how you feel whilst you're doing it. Now, I've done this many, many times in groups of adults who have got master's degrees in education, who have got, we've got head teachers, we've got owners, we've got managers, we've got apprentices. So across the board, they would be sitting there and we'd do this, and you would have some people throwing their pens down and refusing to do any more. You would have some people getting really frustrated. You'd have some people rubbing their wrists and saying how much it hurt. You'd have some people that just wouldn't write at all. They wouldn't even pick up the pen in the first place. So there was lots and lots, and this was from adults in a room who had been working with children for a long time or were new to the profession and just learning. So lots of different perspectives. But all of them had some frustrations about doing that particular task. And when we gather that tuning in, when we get that empathy, we then approach a situation with a child in a slightly different way. And we start to understand, actually, that might be quite painful. And actually, we might need to put something else into place to support. Research shows that the development of fine motor skills depends on the development of those gross motor skills, and that a joined up approach to physical development is important. So for the babies, we might use their whole bodies to make marks with mud, paint or corn flour in a tuff tray, or with food at meal times. A toddler might splash in a puddle and notice the prints they make. Mark making them becomes an important experience as well. And one of the things that I'd like to share with you here is when I was in a baby room and I was observing in a baby room, and they had a low table with small pieces of paper, like postcard size pieces of paper on the table with colouring pencils. So, you know, long, thin colouring pencils. And for the babies, all they were doing with that table was clearing it. So they would go over and they'd just get all the pieces of paper and throw them on the floor and get all of the pencils and throw them on the floor. And the staff were getting so frustrated because they were saying, you know, we're trying to promote mark making and we're trying to get them to do this, but they just keep throwing these things on the floor. And when you look at that and start thinking about it, it's because their stage of development is very much in the shoulder stage of development, which I'm going to share with you now. So the shoulder pivot, they're using their whole arms, their whole big, you know, these big gross motor movements. And so small pieces of paper will never do. The movement comes from the shoulder. The upper body muscles in the shoulder, back and the neck makes that part of the shoulder stronger, and so can be used to help hand make marks. So at this stage, children will often make long, straight or large circular movements. So swinging, climbing, circular movements is what's going to support that child in that stage of development. So if they're working with this shoulder pivot and they're still using it right from their shoulder, then think about big brushes that you could use in the garden to mark make, or massive pieces of paper, or even wallpaper. If you roll out some wallpaper and let them make marks with their whole bodies. Then we have stage 2, which is about elbow pivots. So now you're doing most of the work. The elbow's doing most of the work. So the shoulder needs more support. But within this elbow pivot, we've got to think about how they might be shaking and stirring. So lots of stirring can help, and hammering and using their elbow pivot. So if we think about, if we just take stirring there as an example, there's lots of ways that we can do that within the sand tray, within the water tray. We could have a Play-Doh station, so we're not making the Play-Doh for them, but they're making the Play-Doh and seeing that transformation themselves and doing that stirring motion. And then we've got stage 3, which is all about the wrist. And that's when we're really thinking about starting to strengthen those fine motor skills and thinking about screwing and rolling and twisting and threading. So identify the stages for your key children and plan accordingly, and that's individual to each child. So we've talked a lot about how physical development has a massive impact on our well-being and our holistic development. So we've talked about how that will tie into social development and personal, social and emotional development, and also cognitive development within there as well. So I wanted to introduce you to the SMILE score. The SMILE score is something that was created by Dr. Laura Vater, and I had permission from Dr. Laura Vater quite a while ago to use this within the early years, because it's such a good tool to share with families, to share with staff, and to share with the children. And I actually use it with my children as well. So the SMILE score is all about what you do throughout the day, and as you can see, move is within that. So SMILE is an acronym for S is for sleep. So are we sleeping enough? Have we had enough rest? M is for moving your body. Have you moved your body today? I is for inhale, exhale. Have we taken some good deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth? And have we done that regularly throughout the day? L is for love and connection. Love and connection. So who have we communicated with today? How have we connected with other people? And then E is for eat to nourish. So you can see how there's lots and lots of physical development within here and lots of things we need to think about. So if we get 5 out of 5 and we give ourselves a mark for each of these letters in the acronym, then we're probably feeling really good. If we are at midday and we are feeling quite low, our mood's quite low, our disposition is quite moody, we could perhaps go, oh, actually, I haven't moved my body today, so let me do a bit of that. Or I haven't actually spoken to anybody, let me go and speak to somebody. And for the children, you can look at them and go, right, you don't seem too happy today. How can we help with this? Okay, so you haven't had enough sleep today. So let's do something restful. Let's go outside. Let's lie on the floor. You could be thinking about, oh, actually, it might be time to eat. So have they had enough water today? And you can start to unpick how you can put things into place to support their well-being overall. It's a really good tool to use with families, staff and children. And the children, particularly from about the age of 3, will really start to understand that and do their own smile scores as well. Now, none of this can take place without the positive role models in the children's life. So that is you. That is you working with the children. How are you being a positive role model in terms of physical development? Are you making sure that when you're outside, you're enthusiastic and getting involved in the play? Are you using your whole body every single day? Are you doing your smile score? Have you got a physical development champion or a panko within the setting? And if you haven't, then maybe think about somebody that would like to take on that responsibility and who would like to think about how they can support physical development in the setting. How are you sharing these things with families? It's so important to share these things with families, not only the whats, but the whys as well. So I worked with a setting recently who sent home a tub of Play-Doh for every child when they were breaking up for Christmas. And it was just a tub of Play-Doh and it was a gift and that was that. Lots of the children and parents, lots of the parents came back and said, we didn't use it, you know, we weren't quite sure what to do. We didn't really want to get Play-Doh on the carpet. But imagine if we'd have said to those parents, we're giving you this Play-Doh to support with fine motor skills. This is going to help with pre-writing and with writing skills in the future. And thinking about how you can really explain those whys so they've got the full informative information before they start any activity with their child and they understand the whys. And then, of course, self-reflection, which hopefully you've been doing today whilst you've been listening to this webinar, thinking about how you can improve, what else can you put in place, what impact is all this information going to have on your practice in your setting. And then finally, as we've been saying throughout, share these ideas with your families and celebrate the efforts. Give lots of information, signpost also to things that they can do at the weekends that are free. Where can they go? What sort of activities can they do? What would that be supporting? Which area of development? How can that help their child to progress? And of course, have that invitation. Invite them into the setting, invite them in to celebrate, invite them to share what they have done at home with their own children in terms of physical development and all the other areas of development. So now that we have talked through all of the early years physical development, I feel like I've talked a lot. I'm now going to pass over to Angie, who's going to take us through physical development in primary education.
Well, thank you, Stacey, for that inspirational presentation. Really thought-provoking. So thank you for that. So again, my name is Angie Rogers, and I'm subject specialist for teaching and learning. I've had a varied role throughout my career and worked in many educational settings across a 30-year period, supporting across a range of key stages through group intervention and one-to-one sessions, meeting the needs of individuals across the curriculum and across areas of their development. And of course, physical education and physical that. So everything that Stacey's been talking about. So we're going to look at physical development in primary education. And I have to start with, because that's there, and we have to discuss the National Curriculum for Physical Education. And it states that a high quality physical education curriculum should inspire all children to succeed and excel in competitive sport and other physical demanding activities. It should also provide opportunities for pupils to become physically confident in a way which supports their health and fitness. And it should also give opportunities for them to compete in sport and other activities, building character and help them embed values such as fairness and respect. So you can see that it's there in the national curriculum, but schools play more of a role than that. Schools play a pivotal role in supporting all areas of physical development, as Stacey said, gross and fine motor, creating opportunities for positive habits, raising awareness of the importance of regular physical activity, increasing children's exposure to fun and varied activities, as well as creating more active environments that children find easier and simpler to access throughout the day. We know that personal, social and health education is essential as part of the curriculum. However, the educational benefits associated with physical activity go beyond PSHE. And such educational attainment, concentration and social cohesion contributing to a healthier, happier school. So looking at the benefits, physical activity is a vital part of children's education, as well as being enormously beneficial to their well-being, mental health and physical health. Incorporates all aspects of gross and fine motor as previously discussed. So having the right amount of physical activity can have wider benefits for children. And these include aspects of their behaviour, similar to the example that Stacey gave us in terms of the behaviour that's displayed if there is a lack of physical activity. Enhancing learning and academic achievements. There is research to show this. Build a lifetime of habits of participation, and that can start from the early years. Building character for that individual, building a sense of resilience, determination and self-belief. And schools need to be encouraged to rethink physical activity outside of those PE lessons. Explore more opportunities like lunchtime sports clubs, innovative activities such as active miles, and building in activities in the classrooms. The journey to schools also provides opportunity to increase the physical activity, carrying activities such as cycling to school, walking to school, having a human bus to school. Creating these opportunities for exercise as part of daily routines, schools can do this. Schools can increase the amount of time children spend being active, boosting their physical health, mental well-being, character and resilience. So we're going to look forward now at the challenges. There are challenges, and we know this more recently due to lifestyle choices such as fast foods, screen time, social media. These have created challenges around keeping children physically active. And not only that, it's about the pandemic, our recent pandemic, as Stacey well said, you know, the impact that that has had on children's physical activity. So looking at what the Department of Education can do, Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport and Department for Health and Social Care are striving to continually collaborate on developing and delivering an action plan to promote the physical activity, particularly after the pandemic. This ongoing collaboration aims to ensure physical activity is an integrated part of both the school day and after school activities, and promoting the opportunity for all children to tackle at least 60 minutes of physical activity throughout their day. And this can be challenging for some, so there needs to be some support there in place. Research informs us that there is a link between the physical activity and the academic performance, learning and attention, but this isn't straightforward and it's not linear association. And there is more physical active child is better than academic performance. And there are other factors that play a part in this that need to be considered. So we look at the prevalence here. We know that 1/3 of children are overweight or obese by the time they leave primary school. Obesity has been described as one of the most serious public health challenges in the 21st century. Chapter 2 of the Childhood Obesity Plan set a bold ambition to halve childhood obesity by 2030 and significantly reduce the gap in obesity between children from the most and the least deprived areas by 2030. Inequalities amongst Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups, as well as many children from disadvantaged backgrounds. In addition, issues around the gender gap begin as young as the age of 5, and I know that Stacey talked about that earlier. There is a campaign through the Sports England who are providing £1 million of funding to help empower girls to be more confident to take part in physical activity. And the campaign is called This Girl Can, so it's worth checking that one out. 1 in 8 5 to 19-year-olds has at least one mental health disorder. And as physical activity and mental health are interlinked, the benefits for ensuring the opportunities is key in increasing children's self-esteem and emotional well-being. Active Lives children's data show us that children who are physically liberated and happy are more resilient and more trusting of their peers. And we need to ensure the importance of physical activity for mental health and well-being is recognised and understood by all children. So we move on to think about what we can do in the future. The government's 25-year environmental plan identifies the value of activity through play, getting active outside and having a direct contact with the natural world is absolutely key. The Department for Education is providing up to £400,000 to give more young people and children the opportunity to volunteer in sports, which is fantastic. The Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs and Natural England are also working collaboratively on a 4-year plan called the Children and Nature Programme. Worth checking that out. They're also funding the Youth Sport Trust Lead Consortium project. And the aim is to increase the opportunities for children with SEND to take part in high quality physical activity. Because so many times over the time that I've worked in school, I do see that there is many children that feel they can't take part, they can't access it, and often left to do other activities rather than being encouraged to take part in those physical activities. And it's so important that we get that right. And following the impact of the pandemic on physical health, the government states that it will contribute 320 million to PE and sports premium that will really help these children to engage within physical activity whilst at school. Absolutely key. So we look at new approaches. First of all, let's look at the Ofsted. Ofsted's new inspection framework now allows opportunity for children to support the physical development of children through learning about healthy eating and maintaining that active lifestyle. Schools should not just focus on PE lessons alone to provide that physical activity, but explore more options that are inclusive, and that's absolutely key. And this is what inspectors will be looking for. They want to see a broader, balanced education. They want to see more opportunities to be active throughout the day. And that goes back to thinking about the theories to practice, thinking about those theories about that supporting that gross motor skill that will inevitably help with the fine motor skills. Looking at extracurriculum activities, and that could be before school, that could be during lunchtime, it could be after school, is absolutely key. Being physically active helps to promote, as we've said, that physical and emotional well-being. And it's so important that it's critical, as we've said earlier, to start within those early years to promote that cognitive improvement, psychosocial and cardio-metabolic health, reducing the body fat, helping to increase the academic achievement, leading to better life habits. So moving on, we're looking at this inspirational story here from a rural primary school who really wanted to increase children's physical activity after the pandemic and the lockdown. because they had noticed a decline in children's willingness maybe to take part in physical activity. So they decided to incorporate this with raising money for a local children's hospice by taking part in a virtual rainbow run. The children in Year 4-5 class set the target of running 1,000 miles over the period of a week, which seemed a lot to begin with, and to them seemed unachievable. But they set out to raise £1,000 for the 1,000 miles. They created a Just Giving page, and soon the donations flooded in. And this was the inspiration that the children needed, seeing those generous donations coming in, starting that daily training. And this took part maybe before the start of school, during a lesson, during the lunchtime, after school, whenever they could fit it in, they were practicing that run. And the impact on the teaching and learning was evident, but mostly on the children's mental health and well-being, including the staff, because staff took on board this challenge. And it was all classes. It wasn't just Year 4-5, the whole school. It was a whole school project. And children really wanted to have a go. So I'm going to show you now some evidence of that. And while we're watching the clip, I want you to have a look at the enthusiasm, the excitement, the drive, and just the thrill of something so simple that had such an enormous impact. And the whole school were able to take part, and members of staff. So they danced and they laughed and they ran their socks off. And in total, they ran 1,568 miles, and they raised a staggering £2,496. Absolutely, truly amazing. So we're going to have a look at the clip now. So I want you to have a think about what we've said and how simple things like this could be incorporated into a school's daily plan. Wow, amazing. It still makes me smile every time I see it. Absolutely inspirational. So if there's anything that you can take from this podcast today is to get out there, get active and go for it. And thank you very much to Stacey for that fantastic input. And yeah, fantastic. Thank you for listening.